Welcome to Corralling the Chaos podcast, where we talk publicly about the things you're worried about privately. My name is Alea, and I'm your host. This is the event industry podcast for companies and crew, where we're going to dive deep into things like, what does our industry need that it just doesn't have? What are the things you want to know, but you're just too afraid to ask? And what are the biggest opportunities ahead for our industry? We're going to go deep, and nothing is off limits. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Corralling the Chaos. Today, I want to dive into standardization, but really around kind of one important topic, and that is payrolls. So despite not much being standard in our industry, I do think we can all agree on the importance of paying our people well, paying them often, and definitely important is paying them accurately. So we often hear from freelancers, they complain about having to either chase their money or not even really understanding how they're even getting paid. And we as an industry, we need to pay attention to this if we're going to be successful at recruiting new talent. It needs to be frictionless for them. People need to not only understand how they're getting paid, but quite honestly, they should be excited about it, understand it. How many of you have documented somewhere about how you pay? Most companies just think through the obvious, like we're going to pay regular pay for this time and then pay overtime at this point. But what about holiday pay? What about if someone has two pay rates during the week and then hits overtime? What if someone's call ends at 10:25 p.m.? Are you paying them through 10:25, 10:30, rounding up to 11 p.m.? Unfortunately, our industry has really overcomplicated one of the biggest levers we have to recruit great talent. Why do we do that? This often leaves you with more to explain to your freelancers when you recruit them, more to review when you onboard them, and let's face it, it's a whole lot to manage on the back end when it's time to pay them. To all you freelancers out there, how frustrating is it working for 8 different companies, all of which pay you not only different rates, but the rules about how you get paid differ greatly? And what about you companies out there? How much time are you spending each pay period trying to calculate how you're even going to pay your people? Again, applying all of these complicated rules, many of which can be in conflict, right? These are your rules, but if this scenario happens to happen, it could completely eliminate one of the rules. So there's all of these really complicated conditional ways of paying people. And it's always been fascinating to me to review these payroll documents that companies give to their new hires. And some companies, it's funny to watch them try to explain how they pay their people. And if it takes a 10-page document to do that, that's a problem. But I'm quite certain this is the result of the union contracts out there. But hey, if you're not a union, you don't have to overcomplicate this area of your business. So here are 3 reasons to standardize and simplify how you're paying your people. The first reason is, let's face it, it creates happier crew. Having simple and easy to understand rules of engagement for pay, it makes everyone happier. If we're essentially trying to sell a career in events, which we're all doing, right? We're trying to get people to come back or choose this industry. So if we're trying to sell a career in events, let's make it easy to buy. Let's not overcomplicate it. Let's make it easy to explain. Here's how you make money in this industry. So standardizing how you pay also means fewer mistakes on paychecks. And we all know there's zero tolerance, as there should be, for incorrect paychecks. But the more you complicate it, the more error prone it gets, and the more that could lead to frustration with your crew and freelancers. And last is complicated just quite honestly equals expensive. And it's hard to believe, but some companies still have their entire payroll teams manually calculating payroll each week because they've overcomplicated their rules so much that it takes 3 people, 3 days just to calculate payroll. It's a perfect lesson that less can be more. So I personally wanted to look across the industry to see what were the norms. Were there any trends, patterns? What were the most common ways people paid or companies paid their people? So I was encouraged by these findings and how they compared to even 2 to 3 years ago when I went through the same exercise. So the introduction of AB5, which essentially mandated freelancers in our industry be paid as a W-2, really kind of forced them to follow more simplified pay rules. And then the second thing I think has affected this is COVID, because those two things have really been the catalyst for our industry to begin to simplify things. So we certainly still have a lot of work to do as an industry, but here are a few of our findings. These are really interesting statistics, and this is across hundreds and hundreds of companies in the event space. So we found 76% of companies pay weekly overtime after 40 hours in a week. So this has been largely in part due to companies converting their workforce to W-2 and now having to comply with FLSA and Department of Labor rules. On the flip side, only 17% pay overtime after 10 hours in a day. Again, because so many have converted to weekly overtime. We also found 26% pay overtime between midnight and 6 a.m. Surprising to me was only 19% of companies pay either overtime or double time on holidays. I mean, let's face it, our industry is 365 days a year, 24/7. And if you're asking for them to work an event on a holiday, only 19% of companies are paying a premium for those hours. Another one is 86% of companies, so clearly the majority are not rounding time worked. So in that example from earlier that I gave, if the call wrapped at 10:25, 86% of companies are paying them through 10:25 and not rounding up to 10:30 or even to 11. However, of those, that small percentage that are doing some rounding, 60% of those are only rounding to the quarter hour. So again, for billing purposes, which is a whole different topic, you can continue to bill your hours up to the next hour. Very common practice. But your bill rules and pay rules do not have to mirror each other. And then last but not least are daily based minimums. The two most common daily minimums are 5 hour and 10 hours. But almost no companies out there across the hundreds that we looked at are applying hours not worked towards that weekly overtime. So for example, if I'm an operator and I'm on a 10-hour minimum and I only work 8 hours in the day because that's what it calls for, I'm going to get paid for 10 hours, but only 8 of those hours are going to go towards overtime, which that's pretty standard. Of course, there are those that still calculate things like short turnaround, blended overtime, and some other nuanced rules, but those really aren't as common as they used to be in years past. We have a number of things to standardize in our industry, but my hope is we can tackle standardizing payrolls first, because it's going to help us recruit more to the industry, simplify things for both companies and crew, and it's going to allow us to spend less time calculating payroll and more time investing in our people. So hopefully that gives us something to all think about and something to strive for, because the more we can simplify, the better we are, the faster we can move. So thanks for joining us today. Give that some thought. Be sure to subscribe and reach out with any comments or feedback to podcast@lasso.io. Thanks so much.